The other minig I mentioned before is covering the chalas when one makes Kiddush. And this minig has a source in the Gemara. In Psochim, Daf Kuf, and elsewhere, Poiris, Mappe, Umekadosh. If a person is in the middle of the Suda, and Shabbos comes in, Yom Tov comes in, Poiris, Mappe, Mekadosh, what is the need of Poiris, Mappe? And some Rishonim interpret that whenever you make Kiddush, you need to be Poiris, Mappe. And the Rashbam actually in Masechet Psochim says that the minig was b'yamei kedem, that they brought in the tables only after Kiddush. Once upon a time, in the days of Chazal, Seder Suda was drastically different than it is in our communities. Basically, people sat al gabe mitois, yeshiva mizrachit, on the floor, on rugs, on machzelois, and each and every one had a little table for himself, and it was personal. And therefore, the minig b'yamei kedem, according to the Rashbam, is that they brought in the shulchanois only after Kiddush. But because in our times, and this goes back many years to the days of the Rishonim, we sit around the table, and the table is big and heavy. It is impossible to bring in the table after Kiddush. And we cannot make Kiddush in one place and then move on to another room because Kiddush has to be b'mokum suda. And therefore the minig is Poiris Mappe Umekadosh. So the table is set because the Gemara also says in Shabbos when a person comes home and Shulchanoi Oroch v'Metosoi Mutzas, the Malachim say Ashrei Shekochaloi, and then they say Yehi Rotzen Shehei B'Shabbos Haba. So on one hand, we set the table when people come home from shul. On the other hand, it is customary that we bring in the shulchan only after Kiddush, and that is the minig of Poiris Mappe Umekadosh. But why? Why do we cover the chalas when we make Kiddush? 5 different explanations we find in the Rishonim, and there are many nafkaminas lahalacha between one approach and the other. She'iltas de Rav Achai Goen, one of the more important sources, because in the beginning of Ksubis, and once again in Zvochem, there's a machlokes Tosis and Rashbam. Not many people are aware of this machlokes, who actually was the Baal She'iltas, She'iltas de Rav Achai Goen. The Rashbam maintains that the She'iltas was Rav Achai, that is mentioned a few different places in Shas. So according to the Rashbam, the She'iltas bears extreme importance because that is actually one of the parts of Divrei Chazal, of the basic Torah Shebal Peh. Tosfos rejects the opinion of the Rashbam, and according to Tosfos, the She'iltas was one of the Gainim. Important enough, but nevertheless, not one of the Ameroim. So She'iltas de Rav Achai in Parshas Yisro, She'ilta Nun Daled, the She'iltas explains that Mishum Kvoid Shabbos, we want to bring the chalas in Shabbos Kodesh and not before Shabbos. That belongs to Yakre de Shabbat, to Kvoid Shabbos, to emphasize, and it should be evident and obvious that this is Sud Shabbos, prepared for Shabbos, and therefore we do not put the chalas on the table before Shabbos. So either we bring the chalas in after Kiddush, or we cover the chalas and uncover them after Kiddush, Mishum Kvoid Shabbos. That is the She'iltas de Rav Achai Goen. The other approach is brought in Tosfos, Psochim Kuv Vav, and Tosfos says, Zeicher Leman. One of the dinim that is Zeicher Leman, and the man was covered with tal. Zeicher Leman, we cover the chalas. Approach number 3 is brought in the Mordechai, in Mesechet Psochim, and also in Orches Chaim. According to the basic halachas of brochas, Shivas Aminim come before any other grain or fruit. And within the Shivas Aminim, Kol HaKoidem B'Posek Koidem LeBrocha. So Chito comes before Geffen. So by basic halachic definition, if we have bread or yayin, we should make the bracha on the bread before the yayin. However, the mitzvah of Kiddush, yayin has precedence. If we have no wine, then mekadosh ala pas. But if we have wine, so in Hilchas Kiddush Hayom, yayin comes before chita. But in Dina Brochas, chita would come before yayin. So how do we reconcile this contradiction between Dina Kiddush and Dina Brochas? So we cover the pas, ignoring the pas, as if it isn't lifonenu, and therefore one can make the brocha on the yayin. And in Hilchas Kiddush, yayin is more important than yayin has precedence over pas. That is explanation number 3 brought in the Orchos Chaim and also in the Mordechai in Masechet Sukkah. Number 4, an additional reasoning that we find in the Mordechai, and very well known, Mishum Bezoyin the Pas. If we choose wine and neglect the pas, Mishum Bezoyin the Pas, and pas is choshever than any other Michael. It is Koveya Brocha Liatzmoi, and it is the Iker Seuda, Mishum Bezoyin the Pas. We do not want to insult the pas, and therefore we cover it when we make Kiddush. Well, it is natural that this is symbolic, and many minhagim and halachas and even mitzvahs are symbolisms, because once somebody asks, well, if the pas could see, he could probably hear as well, and he's going to be hearing that we make a boida priya gofen. So the pas doesn't see and the pas doesn't hear. It is for us and not for the pas. And many mitzvahs, even mitzvahs diuraises, some of the Rishonim and some of the great commentators throughout the ages had the approach of symbolisms, and this minig is definitely symbolic. Umishim bezyoyne de pas, we cover the bread when we make Kiddush Hayom. The last approach is also an approach that has sources in Divrei Rishonim, in Leket Yosha and others. In Brochas Mem Beis, the Gemara says, mitzvah lekvoya suda ala yayin. It is a mitzvah to be korveya suda al hayayin. A mitzvah to be korveya suda al pas, but also al hayayin. And to emphasize that our intention is to be korveya suda al hayayin, the pas will have its turn. After Kiddush, we uncover the pas, we make berachas hamoitzi, we're betzei ala pas, alecha mishnah. But we also want to be korveya suda al hayayin, and therefore we cover the pas when we make Kiddush to emphasize that we are korveya suda al hayayin. So these are 5 different approaches. What is the origin and the reasoning of the minig to be mechases a pas when we make Kiddush? And we will discuss 10 different nafkaminas lahalacha between one approach and the other. And this will determine many minhagim. Minhagi yasur regarding the basic minig of Peiris, Mapa, Umekadosh. So in some kehilas, the minig of covering the pas was only Belel Shabbos. Kiddush Rabbi Shabbos in the morning, they did not cover the pas. What would be the argument in explaining and giving basis and logic to this minig? I think it is based on the She'iltas, probably the earliest source of this minig. According to the She'iltas, we do not want to put the pas on the table Erev Shabbos. It is Kvod Shabbos that liachar knisas hayoim, liachar kiddush hayoim, liachar kiddush alayayin, we bring the pas in, and that is more obvious that it's Lakovit Shabbos. It wasn't here before. According to this approach, it is only Leil Shabbos. Shabbos morning is Shabbos, before Kiddush as after Kiddush. So according to the approach of the She'iltas, this minig would apply only Beleil Shabbos. However, our minig is, obviously according to Rashi, maybe Zeichel Aman, maybe Mishum Bezoyin the Pas, and therefore the more prevalent and the more accepted minig is Kiddush Rabbah, the same as Kiddush Leil Shabbos Kodesh. And Shabbos morning, we also cover the pas when we make Kiddush. However, I think in most shuls and most kehillas, by Shalashudis, we don't cover the pas. Why not? Because if it has to do with Kiddush, Shalashudis, we don't make Kiddush. But if it has to do with Zeichel Aman, Lecha Mishnah, we should do the same, Shalashudis. We have Lecha Mishnah and Shalashudis. Lecha Mishnah is a Zeichel Aman. Poiris Mappa is Zeichel Aman. So why would Shalashudis be different than Shabbos morning or Leil Shabbos Kodesh? So according to the She'iltas, this minig is relevant only Leil Shabbos, neither Shabbos morning nor Shalashudis. If it has to do with Kiddush, Mishim Bezoyin the Pas, that we are a Mekadesh Alayayin, then the rule applies to Shabbos morning as well, but not to Shalashudis. If you make Kiddush on wine. Yes. Do you mean to provoke me? Yes. I said before that Hasidim make their own birchas on a henem. I can't say that Hasidim make Kiddush on schnapps, but Galiciana Hasidim do. And that was the minig in Galicia, in Ropshitz, in Sanz, and in some others. So, I grew up in a Tzanza family. I have difficulty of defining who I am today, but I did grow up in a family of Tzanza Hasidim, and I am proud to be a disciple of the great Kloiser Megarebi, and he made Kiddush on Schnapps, Shabbos morning, because that was minig of Oisev, that was the minig of the Divrei Chaim. He was Mekabel of the Rav Shetzerov, but I myself, I do not think we have a concept of Chamar Medina in our days. I don't think schnapps today could be defined as Chamar Medina. So the Kloiser Megarebi made Kiddush on banana liquor, of all the drinks in the world. So why did he use banana liquor? Because the Belzerov, Rabbanan, used banana liquor. And when the Kloiser Megarebi visited the Belzerov said, Zagita Mashke. He definitely was an angel, but one could challenge his taste when it comes to liquor. So to define banana liquor as Chamar Medina would be very, very far-fetched. Probably besides Belz Chassidim and Kloiser Chassidim, nobody drinks banana liquor any longer. I wonder why they manufacture it. But today, we are living in a modern day and age, and there is such a tremendous variety, I don't think any mashke could be defined as Chamar Medina in our day and age. Everything today is catered to one's personal taste. So once upon a time, there were entire areas, towns and cities and countries where most of the people drank the same mashke. That is no longer. I think the only thing that everybody drinks, or many people drink, is Coca-Cola. And Coca-Cola it's an artificial mashke. I don't think it could be defined as Chamar Medina. What I really feel is today what people drink more than anything else is water. And water, you definitely can't make Kiddush on water. And therefore I feel that the only thing you could really make Kiddush on is wine or grape juice, because in my opinion, grape juice is kiyayin lechol dover. Besides Purim, grape juice is wine for Dalat Koises, for Kiddush, for anything else. But besides yayin, nothing would be defined today as Chamar Medina, and therefore I am very doubtful if one could really make Kiddush on schnapps today. So, coming back to the nafkaminas between one approach and the other, Shalashudis, some achronim say you should cover the pas by Shalashudis as well, because it's Zeichel Aman. And just as we have Lecha Mishnah by Shalashudis, we should cover the pas, because if we have Lecha Mishnah Zeichel Aman, we should have Poiris Mappa Zeichel Aman. But the more common minig is that by Shalashudis we don't cover the pas. Obviously, our minig is based on Kiddush, Mishum Bezyoino Shal Pas, and therefore by Shalashudis we don't do it. The Yoruch Reish Tzadik Aleph Sif Yud maintains, he writes already that by Shalashudis the minig is not to cover the pas, obviously based on the approach that the reason to cover the pas is not Zeichel Aman, but Mishum Bezyoinoi Shel Pas. Another nefkamina would be, do we need a mappa beneath the pas or only on top? If it is Mishum Dinei Brochus, Yakra de Shabbata, Bizyoinoi Shel Pas. According to all these reasonings, you only need to cover it from above. But if it's Zeichel Aman, you need Metachas and Me'al. Uberedes Atal, Yered Haman Olav. So the man was enveloped in Tal from beneath, from above, and therefore we need a mappa beneath and not only on top. And if the pas is brought in la'achar Kiddush, do we still need to cover the pas? If it is mishum bezyoinoi shel pas, it is only when you say berchus hagefen. But if it is zeichel aman, then even liachar berchus hagefen, which brings us to various different minhagim. When do we uncover the pas? So everybody agrees that by Kiddush, the pas should be covered. Till when? So in some sources we find after Kiddush. When you approach Berchas HaMaitzi, you uncover the pas. There is somewhat of a controversy regarding the Mishnah Brura, Reish Ayin Daled, Sif Koten Daled. So the Aruch HaShulchan at Reish Ayin Aleph Sif Chov Bey says, Achrei Berchas HaMaitzi. When you say HaMaitzi, the pas still should be covered. That is obvious in the Emden Siddur by Rabbi Yankiv Emden. This minig necessarily being based on Zeichel Aman. Maybe also Kedima of Brachas. But you already said the Berchas HaGefen, so what's the point in keeping the pas covered when you say Berchas HaMaitzi? So if we maintain it is Zeichel Aman, there is room for an argument that when you say Berchas HaMaitzi, still should be covered. As long as it's Lechem Mishnah, it should be like Lechem Mishnah of Man. However, that is not a necessity, because the man was covered with tal only as long as it was out in the field. But when it was brought into the house, it was no longer covered with tal. So this is only a zeichel aman. And one could argue, maybe it's enough of a zeichel if it's by Kiddush covered. Many argue that it's a halachic mistake or violation if the pas is covered by Berchas HaMaitzi. Because Berchas HaNahanan, like Berchas HaMitzvahs, are to be said oiver l'siyosan v'lo oiver de'oiver. As little hefsek as possible should be between Berchas HaMaitzi and B'tzias HaPas. And that is the reason that we cut into the Moitzi and the Lechem Mishnah even before saying the Bracha. So why cover it? Necessitating uncovering the pas between the Bracha and Achila, and therefore the more common minig, which is also my minig, when I say Berchas HaMoitzi, the pas is not covered. So there are various different minhagim, and these minhagim are also dependent on the various different explanations. What is the origin and the rationale of the minig of covering the pas? Ulai, ken. If you cover the pas with a transparent cover, or with a reshet, in which you could see through the mappa. But because I said before that covering the pas is symbolic, I'm not thoroughly convinced that it makes a difference whether it is see-through or not see-through. After all, you covered the pas. And even if you can't see through, you know it's there. So it's more of a symbolic act covering the pas. So I don't know whether there really would be a halachic difference whether you could see through or not see through. But what is the din if a person is mekadosh ala pas? He has no yayin, or he cannot drink wine for health reasons, and he is mekadosh ala pas. Does he have to cover the pas? This is a discussion between great poskim, the Levush and the Elio Rabbah. Once again, dependent on the different reasons. If it's boishtoi shall pass, or if it is because we have a problem, which of the two brachas comes earlier, has precedence, then if you're mekadesh alakas and he's not even making berachas hayayin, there's no reason to cover the pas. But if it is zeichel aman, then he should cover it, even though he is mekadesh alapas. So once again, there would be a difference between the two tamim. And how about Kiddush Shabbos in the morning, when you have no pas, and there's a Kiddush in shul, and there's cake or cookies or kugel? Do you have to cover those? Once again, if it is zeichel aman, you're not doing lecha mishnah. This is not the ikasida Shabbos. Lecha mishnah is a concept. Lecha mishnah shall pass and berachas amoitzi. So by Kiddush you don't have a lecha mishnah. It has nothing to do with zeichel aman. But if the reason is mishum boishtoi shall pass, well, maybe only by pas there is a kpeid of the covered of pas. But if the reason is maybe berachas amoitzi and chito has precedence over berachas hagefen, that even by a kiddush, if you're eating kugel or cake that is made out of chito, you have the problem and therefore you should cover. And this is also a minig that different minhagim in different places, also dependent on the different approaches and different reasonings. The Leket Yoshu was one of the Rishonim, a Talmud of the Trumas Hadeshen, and he quotes that the meaning of the Trumas Hadeshen was many Talmidim of the Yeshiva. I think it's the Maril, not the Trumas Hadeshen. The Maril was a great Rosh Yeshiva, and they all were samach al shulchanoi, and the table was full of food, and only the Maril, he was the Mekadesh, he covered his Lecha Mishnah, but all the others were open, and they were not covered. And his approach is that, as I said, it is a symbolic act, and therefore it would be enough if his pas is covered, and that obviously is more acceptable if it's zeichel aman. So many different minhagim, and one of the interesting minhagim that we find in the Magen Avraham and Siman Kuf Pei, the Magen Avraham brings a minhag that by berachas hamazon once again the pas was covered. Why? Because once again we have the kais, which is an interesting minhag, and many achronim question this minhag because zeichel aman, by berachas hamazon we no longer have lecha mishnah. Is the problem boishtoi shall pass? We cannot and we do not make berachas hamoitzi once again. We already made a moitzi at the beginning of the Suda. Is it that we're not mevorach ala pas? Kosher brocha is only yayin. So it is very difficult to understand and define this minig in accordance to all the different approaches we quoted. So one of the early achroinim, Shalas Teshuvas Be'er Eisik Simen Chov Zayin, has an original approach. But the source of this minig is Rabbeinu Bachye, one of the Rishonim, and therefore it really merits an effort to give somewhat of a hezbollah. One of the Svarim, the less known Svarim of Rabbeinu Bachye is Shulchan Shel Arba, and it is there that he writes the minig once again to cover the pas b'shas berachas hamazon kos shel brocha. So the Be'er Eisik says, well, berachas hamazon brings down shefa. Ve'ena brocha metzuya ela bedover hasomu min. So in a symbolic way, we cover the pas. It should be somu min ha'ayin, that berachas Hashem ita ashir, and the shefa brought down alidei berachas hamazon should be challah la pas, and that is why, that is the interpretation of the Be'er Eisik in covering the pas by berachas hamazon as well. כן, בליל הסדר אנחנו מגלים את המצות ומכסים את המצות, but that is a totally different origin than anything we discussed today. That has to do with Leil HaSeder. And in some parts of the Leil HaSeder, when we want to stress the matzah zu she'onu oichlem, sipi yetzias mitzrayim, we uncover the matzahs, and in other parts we stress only the dalat koises and not the matzahs, but that is a different idea and a different concept. Well, if he is Korvei Suda, and then he needs to make a Berchas HaMoitzi and Berchas HaMozain, then he definitely would have to cover the pas. However, I know very few people that Shabbos would be Korvei Suda and Pas Abol Bekisnen. Why would one do so? And I am